oxidation stress throughout our arteries. Compare the blood oxidation levels after consumption of a low oxidised oil to that of a highly oxidised oil. Understand that oxidation within our circulation is a cause of heart disease. And if you understand that, you can see why seed oils could be a problem. But besides their oxidation potential, there's another element to seed oils that makes them particularly problematic when it comes to heart disease. Something which is usually not considered at all. Something which is usually not considered at all. You see, they contain something called phytosterol, or plant sterol, which you can think of as fake plant cholesterol. As you can see, they're near identical to cholesterol, but not quite. Similar enough to be absorbed by the body in place of cholesterol, but different enough to not work the same. Basically, phytosterols interfere with the normal biochemical processes that use cholesterol. The highest concentration of these plant sterols is found within seed oils, especially rice bran, corn and rapeseed. And another significant contributor of these plant sterols in our diet, simply due to the volume consumed, is cereal. And while our body tries to reject plant sterols, some does get through. About 1% of what we consume actually gets incorporated into our tissues. And one of the tissues this fake plant cholesterol gets into is your arteries. And it's probably no surprise that when it does, it's associated with premature, severe cardiovascular disease. Proof of that was provided when researchers performed a biopsy of the aorta of a 33-year-old male with premature severe cardiac disease and detected plant sterols. And this is not an isolated finding. These three papers from 2005, 2011 and 2015 all reported plant sterols were detected in diseased arteries. Interestingly, it's likely that these plant sterols also contribute to the crystals found in atherosclerosis. They may not, in fact, be made of cholesterol. Understand that you're not looking here at crystals directly, but rather the space where they used to be before they were dissolved in processing. And it's entirely possible, and I would argue likely, that one source of these crystals is phytosterol or plant sterol. You see, being almost identical to cholesterol, plant sterols readily form crystals which are difficult to differentiate from those formed by cholesterol. Remember these foam cells, the supposed supply of cholesterol? Well, while foam cells don't like to release their cholesterol, they're only too happy to spit out phytosterol or plant sterols. This makes phytosterol a much more likely contributor to these crystals. Observe how foam cells or macrophages are only too happy to store cholesterol compared to plant sterols. And plant sterols, which may form these crystals, might also be supplied by degraded red blood cells. For not only does the outer membrane of red blood cells contain more free cholesterol than any other cell in the body, it also contains plant sterols. The consumption of plant foods, especially seed oils, has been repeatedly shown by research to result in plant sterol accumulation within red blood cell membranes. Interestingly enough, at the expense of cholesterol. And I think it's very likely that through oxidation stress and plant sterols, seed oils are quite possibly an even more significant cause of modern disease than are carbohydrates and sugars. This paper, for example, after analysis of over 195,000 subjects, concluded that seed oil intake resulted in a greater incidence of death than sugar when it exceeded 6% of energy in the diet. Consider then that the average Australian gets more than 13% of their energy from seed oils. And when we look at the intake of polyunsaturated fat, which is a very good surrogate for seed oil intake, we can see consumption began to rise in the early 1900s, well timed to have a causal role in the epidemic of heart disease that followed. which is why 3 large-scale randomised controlled trials, the gold standard of research, have found that replacing saturated fat with seed oil led to a significant increase in mortality. And to my knowledge, there's no study that shows otherwise. Ongoing review of data from the Women's Health Initiative, for example, a study of over 48,000 females, has found that lowering saturated fat intake is associated with an increased risk of heart disease of between 47 and 61%. Findings of another study based in Sydney, which ran between 1966 and 1973, were finally disclosed in 2013, reporting that replacing saturated fat with polyunsaturated fat in men who'd had a heart attack increased their subsequent risk of death by 62%. And in a very similar story, the mortality data from the Minnesota Coronary Survey, which was completed also in 1973, was not published until 2016, and when it was published, it revealed that in a population of 7,000 participants, increased seed oil intake increased the risk of death. The totality of these studies provides compelling evidence of the dangers of seed oils. The plant sterols within seed oils also plays a role in reducing blood levels of LDL. It does this by inhibiting the normal, healthy absorption of cholesterol from the small intestine that leads to a reduction in the production of the LDL precursor, VLDL, and it also increases the removal of LDL from the blood. And this combined LDL lowering effect of plant sterols is why increased saturated fat intake seems to raise cholesterol. You see, saturated fat often comes from animal sources. That means it doesn't contain plant sterols. And if you reduce your seed oil intake while you increase your animal fat intake, your cholesterol levels may be permitted to return to normal levels. Not go high, because saturated fat's not making it go high, but it's the removal of the seed oils that's permitting the LDL to rise back to normal, healthy, physiological levels. There's one major exception to saturated fat intake being associated with increased LDL, and it's the exception that proves the rule. That's coconut oil. Coconut oil is a plant oil. It contains sterols, and that's why coconut oil drops LDL levels, while at the same time loading your body tissues with plant sterols. Indeed, this knowledge makes me reconsider whether coconut oil is actually healthy. To close,